Jewish Education in Media is pleased to present L'Chaim, a program that highlights the people, issues, and events of importance to the Jewish community. Now here is your host, Rabbi Mark Golub.
I'm Mark Golub, and on this edition of L'Chaim, I have a real treat for you and me, for we're being joined by one of the Jewish community's most wonderful teachers of the Jewish tradition and Jewish history, Rabbi Ken Spiro, Senior Lecturer for Jerusalem Online University and for Aish HaTorah's Discovery Seminars. Ken was born in the U.S., made Aliyah in 1982, and currently lives in Givat Ze'ev with his wife and 5 children. And in addition to lecturing on the uniqueness of the Jewish tradition and on the impact of Jewish history on world civilization, Ken is also one of Israel's most sought-after tour guides, licensed by the Israel Ministry of Tourism. And Ken Spiro, it is so wonderful to have you here. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for
I told
having
you
me.
off camera, I am a real fan of yours. I think what you do is spectacular. Can we talk first a little bit about you?
Sure.
Okay, so you were born where?
I was born in Brooklyn. I'm 4th generation Ocean Parkway, but I grew up in New Rochelle, New York.
Okay, and you go to school where?
I went to public school, New Rochelle High School, and Vassar College undergrad.
Okay, you have an interesting wrinkle to your educational background because you did a lot of studies in Russian literature and Russian culture, correct?
Right, I studied in high school Russian language as my major in college. I also did some Japanese because I wanted to do international business, so I figured those would be the hot languages to know 30 years ago.
Right. And ultimately, you actually go to Moscow. You study in
Right.
Moscow.
Like I said, if you want to learn Spanish, you got to live in Florida. So if you want to learn a language, you can learn it in the classroom for years. But I could read Tolstoy in Russian, but I really couldn't have a conversation.
Okay.
So
So you're growing up in New Rochelle. Do you have siblings?
I do. I have an older brother, younger brother, and a younger sister.
Okay. What kind of Jewish home did you have?
We grew up Reform, non-observant, basically. You know, went to synagogue, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Passover Seder, that kind of stuff.
Okay. So then at some point something happens to you because you end up making Aliyah. You become a rabbi at Yeshiva Aish HaTorah in Jerusalem. How in the world does that happen, Ken?
Yeah, that was never, if someone had told me 30 years ago I'd be rabbi in Israel, that was not on my list of career choices and geographic locations. Actually, when I was in college, my parents were concerned about my future, staying with the Jewish people, marrying Jewish, so they bribed me to go learn with Dennis Prager at the Brandeis Bardeen Institute in California between my junior and senior year, which he was one of the first people that could explain Judaism in a way that I felt was meaningful and relevant. And then my plan after college was I got into grad school in business. I deferred for a year. I wanted to go half a year as a graduate student. I wanted to get my Russian up to speed. And when it was communist, you couldn't just hang out as a tourist, so I applied as a graduate student of the Pushkin Institute, Purdue University's master's degree program for Russian teachers. I didn't want to get a master's degree in Russian, but I needed to spend some time there, so I was going to do 6 months there. And then I wanted to take a little more time off. I'd never been to Israel. This was before Birthright, so I applied to do Kibbutz Ulpan. I figured I'd pick grapefruits with Danish volunteers for 3 months.
There had to be a reason. You choose to go to Kibbutz Ulpan. Why?
I really didn't. I just knew I needed to go to Israel. Something was pushing me. Dennis Prager got me interested enough in my Jewish identity, and I felt I got to spend some time somewhere, and I wanted to take a break, and I figured.
Okay, fair enough. And what happens when you go?
Well, I didn't. Well, when I went to Russia, I ended up basically not going to class too often, and you know, when it was the Soviet Union, it was illegal for Jews to even own a book in Hebrew. Forget learning about Judaism. And here I was telling everyone, I'm going off to kibbutz, and I was hanging out with these young Russian Jews who some of them had been refuseniks for many years, whose parents had been refuseniks, and I said, this is ridiculous. Here, I was raised in the land of freedom with, my Jewish education is minimal. Going to Israel really doesn't mean that much to me, and these guys would give anything to go there. And I actually had some amazing experiences in Russia. My first secret Shabbat was in Moscow, and I said, if these guys are risking their lives to be Jewish, there's got to be a lot more there than I've been exposed to. So I basically, by the time I got to the end of my studies in Russia, I'd already decided that I should do something a little more meaningful in kibbutz, and I'm going to go learn about my heritage.
Okay, what's the experience in Israel for you like?
Well, my plan was to stay for 3 months and just get some background. I really didn't know what to expect. And the longer I studied, the more I realized, wow, we have like an amazing heritage.
Where did you study?
I went to a place called Esha Torah, which was a college of Jewish studies. It was really a Bal Tshuva yeshiva, which is a yeshiva, a study hall, for traditional Jewish texts, but designed for people who have little or no Jewish background.
In what language?
Well, all the studies, the texts, once I got to a certain level, we did Hebrew, but the classes where everything was in English.
And somehow that touched you.
Absolutely, absolutely.
You ultimately become a rabbi through Yeshiva Esha Torah, correct? When does that happen for you?
Well, it was a process. After 3 months, I have to add anything about Esha Torah. Rabbi Noach Weinberg, who's the founder of Esha Torah and arguably the founder of what's called the Bal Tshuva movement, his whole thing was proactivism for the Jewish people.
And we should make sure everybody understands what Bal Tshuva movement is.
Right. So Bal Tshuva is someone who comes back to Judaism, someone who's away from it.
It usually applies to somebody who is Jewish, but who has not been engaged in Jewish life, who, to one degree or another, very often even into a real traditional observant lifestyle, becomes more involved in Jewish life. And that's what happened for you, correct?
Exactly.
Okay. Where do you place yourself now in the Jewish, within Jewish movements? Where are you?
So I'm Orthodox, although I hate labels. I jokingly say I'm modern ultra-Orthodox. I don't like to be... Anyone who knows the Orthodox world knows it's actually quite varied. Very varied.
And most American Jews don't understand that.
They don't.
Right.
Don't. Look, there's a fundamental belief in Judaism, the Kol Yisrael Revim Zeh Lezeh, that every Jew is a guarantor for every other Jew. Every Jew is not only responsible, but that every Jew will be held accountable. By the way, it's interesting that anti-Semites never differentiate between whether you're Reform or Conservative, Zionist or not. We all are the target, unfortunately, of the oldest, most intense hatred in history. But that it's the collective Torah, no matter how you interpret it, is the collective treasure chest of the Jewish people. We are who we are because of those traditions. There's I would say, a metaphysical component to the Jewish personality that works together in a synergy that creates this amazing nation that's had this impact on the world. But, not only are we accountable for each other, but it's every Jew's responsibility, no matter where they are in the world and where they're holding in terms of their observance or belief, to fulfill a certain mission, which has been the national historic mission of the Jewish people. Now, I always say you can't represent the Jewish people till you know what the Jewish people represents. And I believe that, ignorance of Judaism is in many ways a greater threat to us than even anti-Semitism.
I agree 100%.
So in that sense, every Jew has an obligation to recognize that the Torah is not just the property of Orthodox Jews. It's the collective treasure of the entire Jewish people. And that no matter where we're holding in our level of Jewish observance or belief or learning, that we need to be, like I always use the analogy of a ladder, moving up the ladder and growing.
That's
and
lovely.
Recognizing that even though we have to agree to disagree on certain things, we have to focus on what unites us as Jews, which I believe are very deep things in terms of our heritage and the inner workings of our very soul, and focus on that and work together and try and put the differences aside and work collectively to achieve what is our historic mission in the world.
You say it perfectly. So what are, you always talk about, you must know the values of the Jewish tradition before you can even represent it. There's a phrase in the Jewish tradition, al regel achat, it's not fair, means not standing on one foot, as if give me a summary, and that's what I'm really asking for. But what are 2 or 3 in your mind of the most unique Jewish principles that have shaped this unique Jewish perspective on what it means to be a human being in this world?
It's what drives all Jews, no matter where we're holding on the spectrum of Jewish observance or belief, is that we're essentially people who are driven to meaning, which of course always explains from Abraham onward the disproportionate impact we Jews are always having on the world, because we always think outside the box. And the very trait that makes us so committed to God is the very trait that pushes us the other way, because Jews just don't buy rhetoric. We like to think things through and challenge. It's that classic statement, what's the answer to a Jewish question? Another question. And I say, why? Why not? And it goes on forever. And we see this in the Talmud, and we see this in the Jewish personality. So, it could be that the first fundamental point of being Jewish is recognize that it's a struggle. To live in reality and get clarity is the most fundamental struggle there is. And it's there to allow us to grow. Without the pain, there's no gain. As we say, it's a fundamental principle in Judaism. The purpose of creation is really pleasure. And it's and pleasure we have confusion about. We think
that's a remarkable Jewish value, isn't it?
it is. And it's, by the way, it's what separates Jews from. It's amazing when I deal with Jews, how many Jews believe that holiness is separation from the physical world, because they have a non-Jewish concept of holiness, which is like Christian asceticism, or even the Buddhist concept of that you separate yourself from the world, and without the challenges, then you could become spiritual. The Jewish thing is roll up your sleeves. Nothing is intrinsically good or bad. Anything, sexual relations, can be the most elevating way of building a relationship in marriage, let's say, for instance, with another human being, or it could be the most debasing thing, food. You can be a glutton, or you can have a beautiful meal and have it be a spiritual experience. That the world is intrinsically neutral. It has the potential for great beauty or great evil. And the struggle on every level is not just a struggle of whether I can live with God, but how am I going to use the physical world that surrounds me? And that's where the challenge is. And you're supposed to love that, because that's where the pain is, that's where the growth is. Like we say in sports, no pain, no gain.
That's fabulous, Ken.
Since the world is intrinsically neutral, everything we do has the ability to move the world one way or another. And there's a little saying, it's not a Jewish saying, but it's a very Jewish idea. It's trifles make perfection, but perfection is no trifle. And the real purpose of mitzvot, the whole commandment system, is to give people a consciousness. It's very much the B.F. Skinner behavioral modification thing, that a person goes after his actions. But it's the guidelines to help us decide how we're going to use the physical world and how we're going to act in our use of the world and in our relationship with other human beings. And by doing those series of small steps, meaning everything like the original garden is neutral, and we have the opportunity as humans, not just Jews, all humans, to move it this way or that way, towards the good, towards the better, the more perfect, you might want to call it, or towards the dark side. Okay, that's the choice we make daily. That's the struggle. That's what we're supposed to love doing. We're not supposed to look at it as, it's like they used to say in Yiddish, schwer zu sein a Yid, it's tough to be a Jew. It's great to be a Jew. Everyone struggles, and we struggle. Okay, we have unique responsibility in the world, but we're supposed to love the struggle and use the wisdom of Torah as the guide to make us, on individual level, the daily little decisions, which are little mini Kiddush Hashem, that will collectively make us greater people, and the Jewish people as one giant collective, as sort of the cells in one body, will do the ultimate big Kiddush Hashem. And the way I always say it is, rather than get to a situation we have to, God forbid, have to give our lives for ultimate meaning, if all of us as Jews would constantly be involved in doing the little things daily, then we wouldn't have to get to the big decisions. That's only the situation we get in when it's critically bad for us. So that, I think, is really, and I agree 100%, that that's the term we need to start using more. We're the God Squad. We have to elevate the world, and we can do that in little ways constantly during the day.
Very lovely. I've sort of summarized some of the things I've heard you talk about. But I also want you to talk for 1 minute about what you wish people understood about how the Jewish tradition has interacted throughout history with the host civilization when it has been part of the diaspora, and how you feel that we have made a contribution on the world scene. Just take a moment to talk about that.
You know what? That's a fantastic topic. I mean, in the words of the prophets, God says, I'll scatter the Jews amongst the nation like a farmer scatters seed. And the Jews have been really the great pollinators of so many of the ideas and creativity of different cultures. As a matter of fact, it's in line. It's a presentation it's my next presentation I'm going to work on. It's called I'll Bless Those Who Bless You, which is the famous blessing that God tells Abraham when he says about the future of the Jewish people. I'll bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you. Through you, all the nations of the earth will be blessed. And I always say as a historian that one of the greatest symbiotic relationships in history has been the Jew living as a minority in non-Jewish world. And whenever the Jew is given free rein to do his Jewish thing and be creative and think outside the box and be disproportionately impactful, it's always been a wonderful symbiotic relationship. And you can literally chart the rise and falls of civilizations and empires by how they treat the Jewish people. But there's a flip side to it I call it the great schizophrenic relationship, that the world doesn't seem to be able to live with us and they can't live without us. They invite us in, it's great, and for no reason they throw us out. The first example is, of course, Egypt. Jews come into Egypt in the Bible, and it's great. And it says, even Isaac and the Philistines in the book of Genesis, it says God blessed the Philistines greatly because they had Isaac living amongst them. And it's a microcosm. And then you follow the story, and then for no reason, the shepherds of the Philistines start fighting with Isaac's shepherds. And I always point this out when I'm teaching. And they plug up the wells that Abraham had dug previously. And it's one of those great, drush, as you said, of going into the story, and if you're thinking actively, since water is like the most valuable commodity, especially in the Middle East, they should steal the wells, don't plug them up. But I say this is the classic relationship we'll have, the patterns being established for the cutting off your nose to spite your face relationship that we seem to have with the non-Jewish world, where it's a great symbiotic relationship. Both sides benefit. For no reason, we're accused of doing things we never do, like being a disloyal fifth column minority. There's a massive backlash against us. We often get driven out or persecuted or even killed. Then the reaction is the country's economy collapses or falls apart. And then they recognize, oh, we missed the Jews. But we never did anything in the first place negative to engender all the hostility. And you fast forward to Germany before 1935, the Nuremberg laws. Germany by far had the most Nobel Prizes, and overwhelmingly it was German Jews. There was no one more German than German Jews. It was the greatest symbiotic relationship between Jew and Gentile in history, is Jews in Germany from the emancipation to Hitler coming to power. It's such an unbelievable and then boom, it's like a cliff. Nothing after that. What did we do in Germany? Jews, I always say this, it sounds kind of harsh, but I think it's true. Hitler not had anything against the Jews. Jews would have gone for Nazism, like unbelievable. They love that kind of top-down, holistic, nationalistic, fix the country thing that has always attracted Jews. But that's the way it happens throughout history, and it repeats itself over and over again. It's one of those rules I always tell my students, you got to be aware of. That we contribute, it's unbelievable, but the greatest explosions of anti-Semitism seem to take places in places where we're most comfortable, and we've done nothing to deserve the hatred that is focused against us.
Are you worried it will happen here?
That's the million-dollar question. I get asked that question probably more than any other question.
Really?
And I always say, first of all, America is a unique country in terms of its relationship with the Jewish people and the Bible and Jewish values. I mean, they even have in God we trust on the money. And there's no country that has inculcated Jewish values from its inception more than the U.S. There's no country that has been better to the Jewish people. Even Germany at the height, Jews went through centuries of horrendous persecution in Germany before it normaled out for maybe a century and then got the worst of the worst with the Holocaust. America's never had anything, basically. There's been low-level anti-Semitism. Governmentally top-down, ghettos, restriction, no, never. So I say it's unique, but I always say if history is the teacher of patterns for the Jewish people, we can never say it could never happen here. And I always use the example, if you told a Jew in Germany in 1930 that there's going to be no Jews left in Germany 15 years from now, and no Jews left in all of Europe because of what the most sophisticated, technologically, culturally advanced country that you love, Germany, is going to do to you guys, they would have said you're out of your mind. No way. It's never going to happen here. So while I believe America is different, I don't believe that Jews can just sit in the United States and feel that, I'm safe and nothing can ever happen. We have to be always proactive. We're never supposed to just rely on miracles. Jews have to be, no matter what you believe religiously or where you vote party-wise, Jews have to always be proactive for Jewish values, for support of Israel, for making sure that human rights and civil rights and pluralism is tolerated. And because when fanaticism comes into the world in any form, the Jewish people will always be the first target.
The German Jew was assimilating at an extraordinary rate. And I've always said, Ken, if you really want to ever get rid of the Jews, be nice to us.
Exactly my point.
The nicer you are, so it's not simply what do you think the future of American Jewry is in terms of persecution. When you look at American Jewry, what gives you a sense of optimism? And I don't want to hear this. There are pockets of enthusiastic return. No. As you look at the broad landscape of American Jewry, is there anything there you see that gives you optimism for the Jewish future here in this country? Or do you look and say to yourself, oh my goodness, if this continues, American Jewry will continue to peter out, and that there's a real problem about the Jewish future in this country?
Mm-hmm. Well, there is. I mean, the rate of assimilation and intermarriage is monumentally huge in America. I always say, by the way, that we've been in every situation as a nation, rich, poor, enslaved, free. The hardest situation to stay Jewish in is not living in some little shtetl in Poland 200 years ago with a bunch of, anti-Semitic, Eastern Orthodox peasants, pogromming through your village periodically around Easter time. It's when we live in any civilized, nice country where there's no ghettos, no restrictions, no taxes for Jews, and your non-Jewish neighbors are wonderful, nice people, That has been the most devastating phenomenon in Jewish history, being loved to death. And what you said is perfect. I say if anti-Semites are really smart, they would just leave us alone and let us prosper, because the hardest situation to stay Jewish in is being free and successful living amongst Gentiles. We just commit suicide, basically, on a spiritual level. And unfortunately, the Jews in America we've been devastated by it. And it's not just America, it's in Europe. So in terms of optimism, Jews can perpetuate themselves. We've done it for thousands of years in diaspora. But the decision that Jews have to make is that Judaism has to be a priority for them. In terms of, if Judaism is something you only do a couple times a year on the side, then there's very little chance you're going to have grandchildren who are going to be Jewish. If your Jewish life, and that's a pretty broad thing. When I was growing up, the only people at day schools were basically the Orthodox movement. Now even the Reform movement has a day school. The movement. I know kids who do that. That's something never existed. We had after-school Hebrew, which was a devastatingly negative experience from my opinion. So any Jew who makes their Jewish identity a priority for them, wherever they're holding in a level, but it's a mainstream, that they make sure their kids have a solid Jewish identity. They have a connection to who they are as Jews. It's not a thing they do on the side a couple times a year. They have a connection to Israel. Like they're Zionistic. They feel strongly about that. Then the chances of them surviving and prospering in America are dramatically increased. But any Jew who decides that my identity is something, it's just on the side. Like German Jews weren't German Jews. They were Germans of the Mosaic persuasion. And the thing people have to realize is it doesn't have to be an either-or thing. It is totally possible and doable to be a completely, a strongly identifying Jew and a loyal citizen of the country you live in. I'm a big Zionist. I believe Jews should live in Israel, personally. I believe the long-term future of the Jewish people ultimately is there. But if Jews wish to maintain their identity and their strong community in diaspora, they have to recognize it. They have to be equally as dedicated, or more so, to the Jewish identity, which is harder to maintain in diaspora. When you're living in Israel, your basic software is Jewish. Your language is Hebrew. Your holidays, it's like a shoo-in, and it's hard to assimilate because everyone's Jewish, So, but when you're living in the diaspora, unless it becomes a significant percentage of your identity, and you live it, and you show your kids that it's really important, then there's not too much chance. But if you do it, I could see Jews perpetuating themselves long-term in diaspora. Although I don't believe that that's the place to be ultimately.
You're not critical of the fact of the diaspora, are you?
No, I'm not critical of it. Look, diaspora is an experience that's been going a lot longer than the modern state of Israel.
No, but at one point you even said there seems to be a Jewish impetus for it, that if we are going to be this light of the nations, that is going to be a blessing to all. I thought you were saying that even within the Torah vision, there was a sense that yes, there will be always a Jewish presence, a sovereign Jewish presence in Ba'aretz, in the land of Israel, Eretz Israel, but at the same time, it is not antithetical to the Jewish tradition for there to be Jews who, when they got to Babylonia, wanted to stay. And when the Jews were allowed to go back after the Persians defeated the Babylonians, only a handful went back to rebuild the Second Temple. And ever since then, major Jewish events have occurred outside of the land of Israel, and that there has been a historical reality to the diaspora that should not be seen as second class. And I have a sense now that as I'm asking you, yes, I understand you like all Jews to live in Israel, but are you critical of Jews who don't? Is there something less Jewishly noble about living outside the land that makes a diaspora Jew a second-class Jew in Ken Spiro's vision?
Second class, for sure not. First of all, living in the land of Israel doesn't make you holy or good either. And there's some very righteous Jews doing great things in the world living in diaspora. Do I believe as a Jew and as a Zionist that the ultimate future of the Jewish people is back in the land of Israel? Absolutely. I believe that, again, all Jewish history and all human history repeats itself. So just as when the Jews first went back with Zerubbabel, when they returned in the early Second Temple period, only 42,000 Jews went back, but with fast forward to prior to the destruction of the Second Temple, there were millions of Jews living in the land of Israel. So too, we see in 1948, 600,000 Jews in the land of Israel. And today, there are close to 6 million Jews living in the land of Israel. And what's interesting is if you look at the statistics, post-Holocaust, there are about 11 million Jews in the world. Today, there are about 12.5, 13 million Jews. The world's population has gone up 260% since the Holocaust. The Jewish population has done virtually nothing and in totality, but in the land of Israel, it's gone up 1,000%. We're basically at tenfold the number of Jews who were there going back since the founding of the state. So what's happening sort of naturally is the diaspora population is shrinking as a total percentage of the Jewish world's population, and now most demographers believe that there's many Jews in Israel as in America, and within 10 to 15 years, the majority of Jews will be back in the land of Israel. So I think it's sort of a natural process as Israel is viewed by Jews in diaspora as a place that is actually first world and comfortable and nice. And I think what kept many Jews in, whether it's 2,500 years ago in Babylon or in Brooklyn today, is the perception that, it's better in America on a physical level. Okay, now granted, I would say in terms of immediate physical threat, it's, I think, a little more intense in Israel, although I would say that I let my kids wander around at night in places that no one in New York would ever let their kids do, because every place is dangerous. It's a different kind of danger. But I think as we've gone on in Jewish history, and Jews have returned to the land of Israel both 2,000 years ago and even today, the perception of the people's connection to Israel and the desire to live in Israel has increased dramatically. So I believe that ultimately the diaspora is not the long-term solution to the Jewish people, but I don't look down on people. You're a second-class Jew for living there. A lot of people in diaspora would say, Israel needs a diaspora. And certainly Jews in America are a very important force in ensuring that America supports Israel. I don't believe it's the only reason why America supports Israel, but I believe they have an important role to play, as long as Jews are doing that. I mean, there are Jews in America who are undermining Israel. There are Jews in America who are antithetical to some of the biggest enemies of the Jewish state today, sadly, are Jews. But the diaspora has a role to play, at least in short-term Jewish history. Absolutely. Do I think that Jews live in diaspora are somehow lesser than Jews in Israel? No.
Well said. Incidentally, I've had Israelis sit here and say that there is a danger, even in the state of Israel, that Israel will become a Hebrew-speaking Canaan, that there is within the Jewish population of Israel a lack of understanding of what Judaism is, the connection of the Israeli Jew to the world Jewish community, and that there is, from time to time, serious concern, even for people living in Israel, about their Jewish identity.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, much of the early secular Zionist identity was that's going to be a new modern form of Jewish identity that replaced the classic. I mean, it's a whole class I do on how many of the early Zionist thinkers believed that Judaism kept Jews in diaspora, and what we're creating in the land of Israel. I'm not talking about today. I'm talking about, in the time of Herzl, is we're creating Hebrews, who have modern Zionist names. Instead of being David Green, they're going to be David Ben Gurion. Instead of being, Shimon Persky, they're going to be Shimon Peres, because a Hebrew has to be a different being. He knows his Bible, but he's not religious. The land of Israel will give him the strength to be the fighting, farming Hebrew kind of thing. So that, by the way, doesn't really exist so much, although there is a huge number of Jews living in the Jewish state who are shockingly ignorant of the most basic tenets of Judaism. I mean, it never ceases to amaze me. But at the same time, unlike much of the early Zionist movement, which was at best ambivalent and often antagonistic towards Judaism, I found that in Israel there's been sort of a meeting, not that it's total unity, and I would never have the chutzpah to say that, but that the secular population of Israel is largely very open and interested, and moved much closer back, not to necessarily being Orthodox, but is very interested in their Jewish roots, recognizing that, as my little kids used to say when they came home, now they're bigger, but they used to say, Eretz Yisrael bli Torah kamo guf bli neshama. Like the land of Israel without Torah is like a body without a soul. The Torah is the blood of the Jewish people. The wisdom of the Torah, the values of Torah are absolutely essential for a Jewish state, and then not just the property of the Orthodox living in Mea Shearim or anywhere. It's every Jew needs to be connected. Living in the land of Israel is a huge advantage to maintaining your Jewish identity, but you can end up being like the Canaanites, as you said, living in a Jewish state, but acting in very non-Jewish ways because you don't have that Jewish software, which is our Torah values. In America, it's much more important because the push is so much more to assimilate. And America is the great melting pot where everything is about assimilating. There, Jews have to triple their efforts. I think Jews could have stayed. It's easier to stay a Jew in Germany because you're the other living in a majority culture than to be in the melting pot of America, which is so open and tolerant. So it has to be a priority for all Jews, regardless of how they define themselves, to make sure that Jewish identity through education and through observance, whatever level they're doing, has to be central.
So I'm glad you came back to America. One more question for you on American Jewry. You talked about how if, in fact, Jews remain committed to the Jewish tradition, that Judaism matters to them, if they remain connected to the state of Israel, then yes, you will see, you can imagine a lovely future for American Jewry. And if they don't care about their Jewish dimension, if it is a sidelight to their being, if they're not involved in the state of Israel, etc., then you are concerned about the Jewish future. I agree 100%. I think most American Jews agree. And this, if there's any unfair question to ask you, it's the one I'm about to ask you. Do you have any suggestions for American Jews, whether we're parents or grandparents, as we look at the younger generation, or even as I look, Ken, at people in my own age group, slightly younger than I am? Of course, if people care about Israel and the Jewish tradition, they're going to be Jewish. But what do we do for the vast majority of American Jews for whom Jewishness simply doesn't matter? Upwards of 65% of the Jews of America have never visited Israel even one time. Mm-hmm. Even though, by the way, many of them are very ready to tell Israel what to do. Mm-hmm. But the real challenge is the next step of what you're saying. Yes, we want the Jewish people of every age to care more about being Jewish. In some way, they can find their own way. I believe Jewish pluralism is very important for the world Jewry and certainly for American Jewry. But what we're struggling with here all the time is how do we excite the apathetic? It's not even rejection, it's just apathy. How do we excite the apathetic Jew? And you'll forgive me for one self-serving comment. This is why we did Shalom TV. Mm-hmm. Shalom TV is reaching Jews who simply, it's not that they just don't know. And all of a sudden, on their television dial, I'm using old spread, as they surf the channel, they come across Shalom TV. And we're reaching tens and tens of thousands of people who are saying to me in emails every day, oh my goodness, I am hearing a Ken Spiro. I'm hearing some of the greatest Jewish thinkers on the world scene today, and I'm excited about something I just wasn't excited about before. And if anybody said to me, why are you spending all this energy and effort and money on Shalom TV, it's because it has the ability to impact in the way the Jewish community has never used television before. It's an enormously powerful tool. But it's an attempt to do what I believe the Jewish community is crying for. Mm-hmm. How do we reach the Jew, again, who hasn't rejected, he just or she just doesn't care. So it's an unfair question to ask you because everybody is searching for answers. But still, I'd love to hear what you have to say about this.
Well, I think you really answered the question yourself, because my experience, even my own personal experience growing up with minimal affiliation, was if a person knows little or nothing about Judaism or his minimal experience is a negative one, then they're rejecting something out of hand. It's like my mother used to say, that food, a little kid, I'm not going to eat that, I don't like it. She said, try it first. So the thing is to get Jews to try Judaism, okay, in terms of, and I think that the most beautiful thing we have is, first of all, the wisdom. It's wisdom for living. My Rosh Hashiva, my rabbi who brought me back to Judaism, Rabbi Noach Weinberg, he always used the term Torah's Chaim. It's wisdom for living. Now, everyone wants wisdom for living, but we don't look, just as Jews think spirituality is going to an ashram and not recognizing that we have the real deal here, the real rigorous, you want to be real spiritual, roll up your sleeves and become truly spiritual in a real world, we can do it for you. We have this beautiful stuff. It's not just pots and pans and ritual. There's meaning to it, but like you said, the key is to get people to be exposed to something, some snippet, which is why, by the way, like you said, outreach of any kind is an incredibly manpower-intensive job. It is, no organization has the budget to put great dynamic teachers. Even if I taught every day of my life, 24/7, I wouldn't be able to reach a fraction of the people that you literally can reach in one television show. You can reach millions of people. So the trick is, it's twofold. It's one is creating the content that is most impactful, that meets the needs that people need. Like when you look at, younger people, what are they interested in? You know, relationships, spirituality. Everyone wants to know about relationships and spirituality. I used to say that you do any class and put the word either soul or sex in there, it's an amazing turnout. And of course, if you serve sushi, then everyone shows up. But it's creating the content, and then you got to market it. If I can do a great class that I know is great, but if I can get it on the internet or on a TV station, and I can have millions of people see it, I mean, it's a fundamental belief that every Jew has a spark. Even Jews who are totally distant from Judaism, they have a little Jewish spark they got from Grandpa Abraham and Grandma Sarah. And if you just figure out how to add the fuel to the spark, you can ignite them and move them. You got to be patient. You got to do it with love. You can't be judgmental. You can never force Jews to do anything. That's the other way you get Jews to do something. Tell them they can't. Because the other solution is just to get the Congress to outlaw Judaism, and then Shalom Tov will be the most powerful medium for reaching Jews, and every Jew will want to go to a synagogue and meet a rabbi. But short of doing that, if we put the resources into what's most important in the Jewish world today, which is focusing on the issues that are relevant, focusing on the people and the content that is most impactful, and then focusing on the medium that enables us to reach the most number of people, then that's the most optimistic. I believe that's the way you can literally make a revolution in the Jewish world, light the sparks of all of these Jews, and really make a movement of return to strong Jewish identity.
Talk to me about another of your pet peeves as it relates to the divisions in the Jewish world.
This is my hot button today. As a matter of fact, I even starting this project. It's called Junite, Junite. The idea is that we need to, it sounds arrogant, but sort of rebrand what Judaism's about. Like, who am I to say this? But so much of the Jewish world spends its time focusing on what separates us. We need to put aside, I'm not just talking about Reform versus Orthodox, it's even within the Orthodox world. The biggest fights are often amongst people who are so close to each other, where they're fighting over, need a microscope to differentiate between, but it never seems to stop Jews from arguing over it. The point is, we're at a critical phase in our history. We're being decimated by assimilation. Israel is facing, existential threats to its existence. Anti-Semitism is at an all-time high, and we're sitting here arguing. It's like the Jews inside Jerusalem in the year 70 fighting a civil war, as 4 Roman legions are encamped around the city trying to get in and kill us. And it sounds harsh, but there's millions of people who dislike us and even want us dead and want to destroy the Jewish state. And rather than saying, hey, we're brothers and sisters, and we have to agree to disagree on things, we have to recognize. And the analogy I always use is family. We never treat our friends like we treat our family, otherwise we have no friends. Family's all forgiving, but the good thing about family is you may not say please, excuse me, and thank you, and you may borrow their stuff without permission, but when you need your brother or sister, they come and help. And if we don't learn to do that, and when we're not being attacked, then God forbid we'll be in a situation where we're being threatened from the outside, and then we'll wake up and recognize that we got to unite and fight off the bigger threats. But why get to the situation when the barbarians are at the gates and we're being threatened physically or we're at the point of extinction because of assimilation, when if we would just put that amazing Jewish ability we have, if we just get 10% of the Jewish world focusing on what drives all Jews and Jewish unity and the things that all Jews have in common, we would, like Malcolm Gladwell says in The Tipping Point, we would reach that tipping point. And we not only see, I think, a renaissance in the Jewish people and tremendous achdus, unity in the Jewish world, but a dramatic improvement in how the world's treating Israel and the Jewish people. Because I believe on a metaphysical level that when we start to fight amongst each other, that's when the threats come. And it comes from a point of we're weak and divided, so we're vulnerable, but also the idea of, I would say, to bring God back into the picture, God the Father saying, my children, if you want to kill each other, I can't stand to watch. I'm going to send someone else to do it. And God forbid we should get to that point.
I love the way you say it. I hope you're successful.
Thank you very much.
So you're with Jerusalem Online University, and you're married. Your sister is married. How is this?
My younger sister, with her 9 kids, is married to Rabbi Raphael Shor, who is the CEO of Jerusalem Online University.
Okay, that organization has done spectacular work. We've been honored to show some of the movies that you produced. And I'm hoping that Rabbi Shor comes on and talks to me next time he's in America. And in general, I just think it's making a very important contribution. And you speak on their behalf and you teach on their behalf. Just take one moment for our audience, because there may be some people who just are unfamiliar with Jerusalem University Online. Talk about it for a moment.
So the whole goal of Jerusalem Online University is really sort of what we were mentioning before, which is to take really high quality content, relevant issues, presented by really good speakers, and get it out there in a way that doesn't require like frontal teaching experience, which is basically either by creating CDs or things that could be shown online or accessed on the internet. So it's a way of mass marketing basic Jewish curriculum in a meaningful way. And we created courses that are like on like things in happiness, or basic Judaism 101. You know, talking about Jews rejecting what they don't know. The level of ignorance of some Jews is so huge. Let's give them a course of the basics of what it means to be Jewish.
And this is accessible online.
It's accessible online, JerusalemOnlineU.com. It's very easy to access.
So talk one more moment about specific Jewish values. And I have one in mind, and I want to hear you talk about this. One of the ethical bases of the Jewish tradition is that we were slaves in Egypt, and we are now free. And we know from personal experience how evil any form of slavery is, and therefore the Jewish people have a responsibility wherever possible to free any slave. Certainly to free anyone who is Jewish who is enslaved, but it goes beyond that. We are a people who try to break the bonds of slavery for all human beings. Before I go further, are you comfortable with that? Mm-hmm. And therefore, much of the ethical principles of the Jewish tradition are be sensitive to the stranger, let alone the widow and the orphan, but to the stranger, to the other, the one who is not Jewish. And that we don't want to ever be guilty of the kinds of treatment that we received, whether it was in Egypt or throughout history, much of which you often describe when you talk about the sweep of Jewish history. We don't want to do to the other anything that was ever done to us, and that becomes a Jewish value. Do you agree there too?
Absolutely.
Okay. Therefore, when you hear people talk about how, for example, the state of Israel is behaving right now vis-a-vis the Palestinians, you will often hear Jews somehow claim that Israel is being un-Jewish and that we are not sensitive enough to the pain of the Palestinian. There is another Jewish value which seems to me to be also essential within the Jewish tradition, which I want you to speak about. I identify it by the term the rodef. That in the Jewish tradition, if there is someone pursuing you to do you harm of any kind, bodily, emotional, spiritual, if it's a harm even to take your life, you do not have a choice. You have an obligation, a Jewish obligation, a mitzvah, to do whatever you can to prevent the rodef, the pursuer, from injuring you or harming you. You must use the least force necessary, but you may use any force necessary. And the Talmudic principle is you have no right to say the pursuer's blood is redder than yours, meaning that somehow the pursuer has more human value than you do, and you do not have a right to do whatever is necessary to stop him. And so while the Christian tradition may have in its classical form, if someone strikes you on the right cheek, turn and give him the left cheek, the Jewish tradition's answer is don't get hit on the right cheek to begin with,
right.
And no one has a right to slap you on the left cheek as well. And I don't ever hear people in the Jewish tradition talk about the value of protecting oneself against the rodef, and that while, yes, the Jew has a responsibility to care for any other, the Jew has a primary responsibility to protect himself, to defend himself, to protect himself from against being murdered, being injured. Suicide is not acceptable in the Jewish tradition, whether it's passive or active, and that one of the values of the Jewish tradition is to defend yourself against assault. I want you to speak about that.
Nothing like a simple question. There's a bunch of there's a Jewish conceptual legal aspect to it. Then there's the geopolitical realities of the Middle East, and there's much
who better to ask that than you?
Exactly. I don't know about that, but there's first of all, there's much misunderstanding about the situation of Israel, the Palestinians, the historical background. There's so much spin that is incorrect about if certain basic assumptions, which many university students I see think, that Israel is this foreign occupier, that we're not the indigenous population, that we're a people whose history in the land of Israel predates Islam by 2,000 years. The apartheid concept, which is of course ridiculous. Anyone saying that doesn't understand what apartheid is about. It's not a white minority government in South Africa oppressing the indigenous population who's the majority. The Israeli Arab population is the minority. Are there social issues? Absolutely. But are they citizens? Do they vote? 100%. As to that Palestinian population that lives in that territory that's disputed, 100%. Is it a huge issue? Absolutely. But like you said perfectly, we have to always balance the intrinsic Jewish desire to be merciful and kind. And trust me, our problem is never being vicious and violent. Our problem is the turn the other cheek thing. The only people who do it in history are the Jewish people. The Christian world has rarely done that, actually. And we will do it to the extent of hurting ourselves. And we're always more concerned, or quite often more concerned about the other than we are about ourselves, even when putting their concern in front of ours endangers our own life. And forgetting even the Torah discussion on values and taking lives. And it's a fundamental, you ask anyone what the first responsibility of a government of a country is the safety and security of its citizens. And when you're dealing with another people who might be living in a state of not total freedom because of many of the decisions they make, meaning that so-called occupation, which is really a misuse of a term, no matter what's going on, we have to appreciate that the reason why there's the things like checkpoints and barriers and all this kind of stuff is because without that, we would be back in 2000, 2001 with every day some person walking into a bus or a supermarket or a restaurant and blowing themselves up and killing civilians. And it always bothers me that people sit in the comfort of their home in like America and pontificate on what Jews need to do in Israel. And when I say when you're living there and you appreciate what's going on, it's so much misunderstanding. But you're 100% right. Everything in Judaism is a discussion. There's nothing that doesn't have a rabbi or a halachic implication. When you talk about saving a life, taking a life, it's a very complicated decision, but it has to come through a broader perspective of how you apply things. Like many people think Judaism says, thou shalt not kill. It doesn't say in Judaism. And one of the 10 Commandments is lo tirtzach, don't murder, not lo taharog, don't kill. And as you pointed out, there are situations in Jewish law where you're allowed to take a life. Warfare, Judaism brought the idea of peace as an ideal into the world, but there are situations in Jewish law where you're allowed to go to war. The most basic is to defend yourself. While we value life more than almost anything else, there are situations in Jewish law where there's a death penalty, albeit it's extremely hard to implement, because the notion is that you have to sometimes destroy evil to preserve good. And if your only law is evil, life preserved at any cost, evil's going to triumph and good's going to be destroyed. So everything is a balance. And I think the confusion comes from two things: a lack of real clarity for most people on what's really going on in the Middle East, what the history of the peace process is, who these Palestinians are, combined with a lot of misunderstanding about what Judaism says about a lot of things. I would say the opposite is true. Given the Jewish people live in arguably what is the most difficult situation of any democracy in the world, and it's the only country whose very existence is threatened externally. There's no country in the world that other countries are daily threatening to nuke. And it's not just Iran. It's been going on since before 1948. Israel behaves with more restraint and mercy than any army on the planet Earth. What army, when we're being shelled with 10,000 missiles and mortar rounds, if it was the U.S., the response would be brutal, and no one would say a word. Israel, on the other hand, we send text messages into the targeted areas. We drop flyers. My oldest son, fought in Operation Cast Lead, and he said it was unbelievable what was going on there. There was no one to shoot at. Every building was mined and rockets. And the central command center for Hamas in that war was underneath a bunker underneath the hospital, knowing that Jews don't bomb hospitals. So when it drives me nuts when people talk about the Israelis doing to the Palestinians what the Nazis did to them, and they're no better, and taking the 6 points of a Jewish star and turning it into a swastika, it is one of the greatest perversions of reality and truth that I know of. It's horrible to see these things, but it all comes from ignorance and misunderstanding and a lot of anti-Semitism.
That's brilliantly said. Do you agree in some way that it is unfortunate that Jews don't understand that this idea of the Jewish responsibility to protect oneself from attack is as much a Jewish value ethical value as any other principle,
Absolutely.
even though it's not discussed, Ken. You understand?
Absolutely.
And, I'm hoping that people like you and other people who are lecturing all the time on what Jewish values are, it is unacceptable to leave that value out. Mm-hmm. And it is just not something we normally think about. I don't know why, but you understand that normally if you hear somebody talk about, well, the Jewish tradition says, Akiva cites, you shall love your neighbor as yourself as the most important Jewish principle. And Hillel says, what is hurtful, hateful unto you, don't do to your neighbor. As if those are the only two overarching principles. There are more. And when I've heard you speak, you do try to also talk about, there are certain insights the Jewish tradition has had about what it means to be a human being in this difficult world. Whether you believe in God or not, you're struggling to just have a relationship with your wife, your husband, your children, your neighbor, country to country, and that the Jewish tradition has fabulous insights about what it means to be a mensch and a lovely person, and very often, rodef is not one of the things that is discussed. You agree?
Absolutely, 100%.
Okay, so from now on, you'll always include the rodef. So you are just fabulous. I've wanted to meet you and sit with you for a long time, but you far exceed anything that I could have imagined. You are just not only brilliant, you're also a lovely human being.
Thank you.
And I think you represent the best of Judaism, how you are bringing people into this Jewish world that I love more than anything in the world, in a way that I believe is exciting, and you are part of the Jewish future. I wish you kol tuv v'hatzlacha in what you do, and I hope we see each other very, very often, here in Israel, everywhere you go. All the best. You're really wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for the time.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. The thoughts of Ken Spiro, Senior Lecturer for Jerusalem Online University and for Eish HaTorah's Discovery Seminars. And if you'd like to learn more about Ken Spiro, visit his website at kenspiro.com. It is out of this world. As always, I'd love to hear your thoughts to some of the things Ken Spiro and I had to say. Please email me, write me, post on our Facebook wall, or tweet me. And if you'd like to be in touch with Rabbi Ken Spiro, you may do so by emailing me, and I'll forward your emails on to him. I look forward to hearing from many of you. Until the next time, I'm Mark Golub. L'chaim, my friends, to life.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support Shalom TV with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more, to the nonprofit organization Jewish Education in Media. Simply visit the Shalom TV website homepage and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check made out to GEM, Post Office Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York, 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive on DVD with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.
L'chaim is a presentation of Jewish Education in Media.